Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. My name is Ed Wicks. I'm an educator at the WSET School London. I've been working in the alcohol trade for about 20 years or so since I turned 18. I started my career in hospitality, working as a cocktail bartender for a very long time, and developed a real love for spirits and wines in this time. In about 2011, I started my WSET journey, going through my level 2, my level 3, and then finally my diploma in wines and spirits in 2014. Um, so First of all, just an introduction on the WSET. So the WSET is the world's leading provider of qualifications and courses in wines, spirits, beer, and sake. WSET has over 50 years of experience in delivering education to help both wine professionals, spirit professionals, and consumer enthusiasts learn more about wine, beer, spirits, and sake. You can take WSET qualifications in over 70 countries through a network of over 800 course providers. If you're interested in finding out more and embarking on your own WSET journey, visit our website, wsetglobal.com, to find your nearest course provider. A few other notes. This webinar is going to be recorded and available to watch back via the WSET Global Events Hub on our YouTube channel. And if I can ask you to please post your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll try and cover as many of them at the end of the presentation. So without any further ado, let's go forward. So this presentation, I wanted to share with you a kind of brief history of gin over the last few hundred years, to kind of celebrate it and see how different adaptations of technology and different changes in society really influenced and molded the category, which is in the modern age incredibly popular and very, very diverse and responsible for some absolutely fantastic beverages. So let's go far back into time, into the Middle Ages. Distillation techniques were really introduced into Europe around this time. And it was influenced by contact with the Arab world through trade and through the Crusades as well. Distillation is able to produce high ABV liquids by boiling weaker alcoholic liquids. A vapor which is more concentrated in alcohol will form, which will then can be condensed back into liquid form to create these higher strength spirits. And back in the Middle Ages, these were thought to have really medicinal and health-giving properties, which makes sense. Back in these centuries, water would have been often contaminated with bacteria and other nasties, and adding high-strength spirits to your water source would have sterilized it and made it be less giving you bad health and illnesses. So these spirits were given the name aquavitae in Latin, meaning water of life. And we see this phrase cropping up in modern spirits as well. Eau de vie in French, meaning the same thing. Aquavit, a Northern European spirit, closely related to gins in many styles, but using different botanicals. And even whiskey comes from the Celtic Whiskerbertha, meaning water of life. So these were really thought of as these kind of medicinal things to use to make your water safe. And distillation practices were spread by scholars and monastic orders throughout Europe, and they really refined the kind of practices of distillation to many different styles. That kind of were the birth and the inset of the modern styles that we see across Europe today. The kind of direct ancestor of gin is a spirit which you can still find today called Genever. This originated in Northern Europe around Belgium and the Netherlands, and is one of many kind of spirit families where distilled spirit will have added to it different botanicals, so natural flavorings of herbs, fruits, and other natural products will be added to a spirit, and then either bottled or redistilled, which will capture the essence of these aromas into the resulting spirit. And this was done throughout Europe and still very much is today. Originally, they were using botanicals or these natural products that were thought to give added health benefits, so different herbs and spices. And in the case of Genever, juniper berries were added. And Genever actually is the kind of derived from the Flemish or for the word juniper. Okay, so these spirits would have been based on kind of malted grains, and they'll be very different to what we consider to be gin today. And we'll see how it kind of evolved over time. So in the kind of countries of origin, different grains, malted barley, rye, etc., were made into an alcoholic liquid, fermented, and then they would have distilled in a traditional pot still. And pot stills are able to produce characterful spirits, but they're not able to produce high strength spirits that we use for modern gins. So these spirits would have had a very different texture, lots of coarse elements and sharp elements that could have been quite challenging, but giving you more aroma of the raw materials used to create the spirit. And these malt wines, as they're called, moetvines in Dutch, are still used in modern Genevers. And Genever, even though it is the kind of ancestor of gin, is more related to kind of whiskies. It's kind of a halfway house between modern gins and whiskies today, because it has that real grainy characteristic that is not often found in our modern gins. So this malt wine had juniper berries, other botanicals added to it to flavor it and to make it more palatable. And then it was redistilled with these ingredients. The aroma would be stripped and added to the vapor, which then when redistilled would be flavored with these new aromas. So how did Genever really kind of come to England, where gin really originated? Well, in the 16th and 17th century, we had a lot of contact with the Netherlands, both through trade and through war. And the Anglo-Dutch War between 1652 and 1674, British soldiers saw the bravery of their Dutch kind of opponents. And the Dutch opponents were drinking an awful lot of Genever before going into battle. And this led to the phrase of Dutch courage. It was kind of this false courage by consuming alcohol before a big event. And British soldiers were emulating their Dutch opponents and getting quite drunk beforehand. Fast forward a few years, and we had a new king. The glorious revolution of 1688 deposed the kind of Catholic royal family at the time and brought in a Protestant William of Orange, who became the new king of England. And it became almost a patriotic exercise to drink these Dutch spirits, Genever, and it became very, very popular. And many people started drinking it. And this was slowly going to morph into the English style of gin. Genever got shortened to gen and then got anglicized to gin. And that's how we saw this new category come about. It would still have been made with these kind of malt wines. It still would have been very different to the modern style of gin that we're familiar with today. At the same time, we saw, or a little bit later on, we saw a real kind of push to get people to consume this product. We started having trade battles with France and real wars with France as well. And previously, French spirits were incredibly popular, such as cognac, etc. And the new kind of government and royal family imposed heavy taxation on imported spirits to try and boost the consumption of locally made spirits. So it became really widely accessible. And it became very, very cheap as well. At some point in the middle part of the kind of 17th century, getting a pint of gin was cheaper than getting a pint of beer, which was absolutely crazy to think about into the modern world. And this led to what we call at the time the gin craze. Gin was so widely accessible and such a high strength that it led to a lot of public disorder, especially in urban centres. In the East End of London, in particular, there was widespread drunkenness and all of its kind of social effects in health and crime and disorder. And it was a real concern for people of the day. And we came to associate gin with this kind of deprivation, and it got the moniker of things like mother's ruin. And it was famously kind of detailed in William Hogarth pictures that you can see on the screen now. So two separate images were produced. Gin Lane, really showing off the ills of consuming gin at the time. And you can see in the foreground, a mother drunk, not realizing that she's dropping her infant off the stairs, people wasting away, vagrants fighting dogs for bones, and all manner of kind of social decay in the image. You can almost think of these images from William Hogarth as the first kind of public health campaign showing the ills of consumption of this product. Comparing it to the same set of images, his image of Beer Street, where people are happy and prosperous and enjoying the social kind of drinking of beer. Businesses are booming, buildings are being constructed, food is being shared, and everyone's having a jolly good time. The gin craze really was a real issue for the age. And people were really crying out for reform. At the time, gin was being made very, very cheaply and in small kind of businesses, non-legislated businesses across our cities. And it led to the government releasing a series of laws which culminated in the 1751 Gin Act. And this led to high taxation on distillation, limits on distillation, meaning that businesses had to produce higher volumes, which really kind of stopped these small businesses, and enforcement of these restrictions and fines on people who were illegally distilling gins. It also led to enforcing higher prices on gin, and both the enforcement of this and the kind of push meant that the price of gin went up and the consumption went down. And we started returning to less alcoholic beverages as our kind of drink of choice, beer, wine, etc. And this was really the first kind of public alcohol regulation in the UK, and it really laid the foundation for regulation in the UK and copied in other countries as well, to help increase public health and decrease the kind of effect of overconsumption of alcohol. So really it was the kind of modern foundation for these laws. Okay. It had another effect on the reputation of gin. Instead of being thought of as this drink of poorer communities and people down on their luck, the higher price really opened gin to becoming a drink for middle class people. And it started to begin to lose its negative reputation. If we go into the 19th century, we started seeing establishments pop up across cities in the UK known as gin palaces. And they're often incredibly elaborate, very decorated establishments, well lit, lots of paintings, often lots of glass to make them really open and friendly. And we saw consumption go up in more wealthy communities, middle class and upper class kind of peoples. And these were very different to the gin shops of a century beforehand, where people were able to purchase these gins, take them and drink them on the streets. And it really kind of polished the identity of gin and allowed people to enjoy it in a more responsible way, hopefully. Around the same time, we also saw technology really evolve and gin really move further and further away from the original Dutch spirit of Genever. We started seeing changes, technology and distillation that was able to produce much purer spirits. And we see this kind of technology still being used today in the production of things like vodkas, modern gins, and many other spirit categories as well. Before the 19th century, we were still using these malt wines, which had these rough textures, potentially coarse textures, sharp textures, and were quite characterful. A lot of innovation in the early part of the 19th century, especially with the coffee still invented by Aeneas Coffee in the 1830s. Instead of the pot still distillation, which is a batch process, which is unable to create these very high strength neutral spirits, the column still allows distillations to much higher strength with multiple chambers continuously redistilling and condensing vapor to enforce more separation of alcohol and other elements in the fermented liquid. Is able to produce incredibly high strength spirits up to 95, 96% ABV. And at this distillation strength, there is very little impurity, very little aroma, generally just ethanol and water. And this is what we see in modern gins, and is fundamentally what vodka is today, which you're purchasing, these neutral spirits. The neutral spirits, having a lighter texture and less aroma, allowed more subtle botanicals to start being used. And this really led to the molding of gin away from Genever, using different ingredients. And distilleries in London really kind of was the driving force of this new style of gin, which led to the kind of London dry style. And we use a lot of different botanicals, not just juniper in London dry. Juniper has a real piney, resinous, kind of oily kind of characteristic, slightly fruity note. But we also see coriander seed, which has a real floral characteristic, citrus peel, which gives citrus aromas, different roots that give earthy, peppery notes, and other spices and things like cinnamon and licorice, which give added kind of complexity. And these ingredients in various combinations are really what we see in the traditional kind of London dry style. These kind of more delicate aromatic spirits also are easy to mix, and we saw gin in the latter part of the 19th century becoming synonymous with kind of cocktail culture and in beverages such as the gin and tonic, which were becoming online around this time. So we saw kind of gin being moved into a mixing drink, which we still see to this day. The kind of gin started spreading outside of the UK as well, and it was really linked to the rise of the British Empire and colonies in India and Africa and the Americas as well. And we saw the British kind of spread gin throughout the world. And we saw the very popular gin and tonic kind of come around at this time, especially around colonies in India and Africa, where malaria was a serious concern for the colonialists. Tonic water was created, which is heavily infused with quinine, which is a chemical that offers a small amount of protection against malaria. It's often disputed on how actually effective tonic water is at prevention of malaria. But at the time, it was thought to be this health tonic. It's incredibly bitter, especially at the time. So lots of sugar was added to it to make it more palatable. And gin was also added to it as well to make it more attractive to drink. And this led to the very, very popular gin and tonic. Being spread throughout the British Empire was often done by traders, sailors. The Navy was very responsible for kind of moving gin across the world as well. We often think of the British Navy giving rations of rum to the sailors, but to the officer classes, the ration wasn't rum, but it was gin, which really shows the kind of respectability that gin had gained in this time. Meaning it was more a drink for the kind of upper classes and the officers. And this led rise to a very popular category still today of Navy strength gin, which is distilled to a higher strength, and it's got a much more bold kind of aroma of juniper. Gin also became very popular in North America, in cities on the East Coast, such as New York and Boston, and became really influential in early cocktail culture. And we see many classic cocktails such as the martini, Tom Collins, and slings being created from this point and onwards. And it really became embedded in cocktail culture at this time. This was helped by other factors as well. A pest of the vine had destroyed many vineyards in France, which meant brandy production was way down in the middle part of the 19th century, which led gin in the door to be able to be used more frequently in these early cocktail bars and hotel bars, etc. And at this time, we saw some of our kind of biggest distilleries that are still producing spirits to this day come online. And these were early adopters of the modern technology of the time of continuous distillation in column still, such as the coffee still. So we saw Tanqueray being established in 1830, Gordon's 1769, and Beefeater. All of these producers really capitalized on the demand for gin in North America and across the world, and became really influential in helping mold that kind of London dry style. And then coming to slightly more modern times, in the 20th century, we saw that because of the cocktail culture, early cocktail culture, gin becoming very popular in fancy bars in the United States and in Europe, in hotel bars in Paris, in London. And again, these classic cocktails such as Martini, Negroni, were being invented at this time. However, it wasn't all good in the 20th century. The Prohibition era in the United States between 1920 and 1933, which prohibited the consumption of alcohol and the sale of alcohol, led to some really poor quality gins being made by illegal enterprises, with really poor quality spirits being used, often known as bathtub gins, and this was of very, very poor quality. Prohibition was repealed, and then quick after that point, we saw World War II. And with the return of people after the war, in the latter part of the 20th century, we saw other spirit categories really coming to the front of people's attention, and vodka became incredibly popular, really at the expense of the market share of gin. And gin became associated with previous generations, and the popularity really started to slump, thinking that was a drink for people's grandparents and parents rather than something that was cool and accessible. But that's not where we are today. Gin has had a huge renaissance in the last couple of decades, really starting in the late 1980s and 1990s, with smaller distilleries experimenting using new botanicals and creating interesting styles. Around the same time in other markets such as Spain, where gin was really, really popular, gin and tonic became a premium experience in bars in large glasses, served with special tonic waters and elaborate garnishes of herbs and berries and different kind of citruses as well. And to capitalize on this, companies started making premium tonic waters, and brands such as Fever Tree started to emerge to complement this kind of beginning renaissance in gin. And we've seen this really keep moving forward to the modern age with gin festivals, bars, an explosion of new distilleries, and gin becoming a really fashionable and diverse kind of category. And it really, for me, is a lot of influential kind of brands such as Hendrix really led the way, redefining gin using unique botanicals such as rose petals, cucumber. Sipsmith in 2009 managed to be successful in repealing some of the Gin Act laws of 1751, allowing in the UK smaller craft distilleries to make small batch gins. And this really became very popular and led the way for smaller distillers to produce these really interesting artisanal products. And we see this boom and lots of new kind of modern styles of gin using really interesting botanicals. And we'll go over a few of the kind of styles that you can find today, such as pink gin and contemporary gins. So the kind of gin styles that we see on the market today, we can really think of the classic styles that have been around for many, many generations. London Dry is the classic style. Juniper is the most prominent kind of characteristic, often framed with that kind of citrus, spicy, and floral note from other botanicals. Old Tom was also kind of created in the kind of 19th century, 18th and 19th century. This is a sweetened gin that was very popular at the time and has recently kind of got a revival from modern distilleries. A great example that you can find is something like Hayman's Old Tom. And then that Navy strength gin, which was popularized by the British Navy, is really denotes a higher strength gin, much more alcohol, much more concentrated aromas, and is really ideal for intensely flavored cocktails where the gin character really shines through. My particular favorite, Plymouth, is a fantastic example, but Sitsmith VJOP is absolutely delightful with a really intense juniper characteristic. And then we have kind of more modern styles of gin, contemporary gins. This is a style where juniper is still very much in the kind of botanical ingredient list, but it often takes a back seat to other aromas that can be equally as pronounced. Lots of citrus, herbal, floral notes, such as that Hendrick's gin I mentioned, which has a real particular kind of cucumber and rose petal aroma. Or Monkey 47, which has 47 different botanicals, and juniper is just part of that recipe. Modern gins often use locally sourced ingredients, really reflecting the place where the gins are created. One of my absolute favorites, being a wine educator as well as a spirit educator, I love Four Pillars Bloody Shiraz gin from Victoria near Yarra Valley, using the grapes from the vineyards nearby infused into their kind of London Dry gin, produces this really delicious product with a deep kind of purpley ruby color. And then we also see this kind of modern style of pink gin where we infuse with fruits like berries, raspberries, etc., rhubarb, giving it this kind of delicate pink color and the kind of sweeter, fruitier kind of style. And we see many distilleries expanding into this kind of new kind of category. So those are our kind of modern styles of gin. I'd like to finish up with a couple of different recipes that you can try at home. Really, really simple one, first of all, and something really useful to have in your freezer, ready to go, especially when you have your unexpected guests dropping in over the holiday period around Christmas or New Year's Eve. And this is the simplest thing you can do. You just need a bottle, you need some gin, some dry vermouth, and some water. You mix the ingredients together, put it into a bottle, seal it, put it into your freezer. You don't need to shake it or stir it. The filtered water is very important. Normally when creating a cocktail, one of the most important factors is the dilution on stirring over ice. And you're not replicating it, that kind of ice shaking or stirring. So adding a little bit of water helps dilute it and give it a kind of softer texture on your palates. So bottle it, put it into your freezer. Then all you need to do is take it out, pour it into a cocktail glass, and then garnish either with a lemon twist or an olive. And this was a kind of twist that I created for this webinar. A White Lady is a very classic gin cocktail. It's kind of like a gin sour with orange liqueur, triple sec, lemon juice, an egg white, and gin. I gave it a very slight Christmas twist and replaced some of the lemon juice with cranberry juice to get that kind of Christmassy flavor and to give it a delightful kind of pinky reddish color. So our ingredients: 50 mils of London Dry gin, 25 mils of triple sec, such as Cointreau, Grand Marnier, 15 mils of cranberry juice, and 15 mils of lemon juice. And then optionally, you could, if you wanted a little bit sweet, add some simple syrup or a little bit of sugar to taste. Then add in an egg white, or if you want a vegan alternative, aquafaba can be used. The egg white, when shaken, gets this really delightful foam that sits upon the cocktail, and that adds a real silky texture to the drink below. So to make it, shake all the ingredients together with ice in your cocktail shaker. Remove the ice and dry shake to emulsify and get that real nice pretty foam. And then double strain to remove any small shards of ice into a chilled cocktail glass, and then garnish with a lemon twist. And hopefully you really enjoy it. So that's the presentation. I'll just quickly look at any questions in the Q&A box. If you have any questions, please do post them now. And let's have a little look. So we don't have any at the moment. So let's have a look. Any questions at all? Well, if that's the case, I would like to thank you all so much for attending. Thank you for watching. Please complete the feedback poll, which will come up on your screen in a few moments. And a recording of the session will be emailed to everyone, as well as being available to watch on the WSET Events Hub on YouTube, where you can catch up on all our previous events. And to find out more or sign up for any of our wine, beer, spirits, sake qualifications, please visit our Where to Study page at wsetglobal.com. And thank you very much.